That was great. Okay. Oh, she's recording this already.
Yeah, it's an interesting
Hey, you want to not record
opportunity
us until
there.
we start?
What's that?
Gabby, you want to not record us until we start?
Oh,
Or
yeah, I was gonna start letting people in because it's 5 minutes till but I can hold off if you want. Hi to all of those of you joining. Welcome to the biggest challenge facing nonprofits today, executable strategies for increasing donor acquisition, building lasting relationships, and increasing donor retention. It's currently 1:56. We're going to go ahead and start this session at 2 p.m. So just come in, enter where you're joining us from into the chat box, say hello. We're very excited that you're here with all of us today. We'll get started shortly. We have some more people coming into the room. Thank you all for being with us today. We're going to be starting at 2 o'clock. The chat box is open though, so if you want to let us know where you're joining from, say hello, what organization you're here with. We're so happy that you're joining us today. The session is the biggest challenge facing nonprofits today, executable strategies for increasing donor acquisition, building lasting relationships, and increasing donor retention. You have your chat box and your Q&A. So during the session, if you want to ask any questions, make any comments, feel free to use those. So myself and our two panelists can see all of your ideas and comments and questions during the session. All right, we have a few more people still coming in. We actually have a lot of people joining, so I want to give them a chance to make it in time before we get started. Just to welcome you all, if you're joining right now, this is the biggest challenge facing nonprofits today, executable strategies for increasing donor acquisition, building lasting relationships, and increasing donor retention. If you're just now joining, make sure you utilize the chat box to let us know where you're from, what organization you're here with, so we can make sure we know who we have on today. I'm going to get started in about a minute so we can get a clean recording for us. You will be receiving a recording of the webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So no need to take any notes. You'll be getting everything you see here if you want to look back on any of the great information that we're going to be presenting and sharing with you today. So give a couple more seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to do a clean introduction so we can get a nice intro for our recording, and then we'll go right ahead. So welcome everyone to the biggest challenge facing nonprofits today, executable strategies for increasing donor acquisition, building lasting relationships, and increasing donor retention. So just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two panelists shortly that you see here. And then we're going to hear from you. We want to ask you guys some questions to get your feedback. This is an interactive discussion, so we want to make sure that we're hearing from all of you during it. So if you have any questions, any comments you want to make, any strategies that your organization does, make sure you drop that in the chat box. You can also utilize our Q&A box down below if you want to ask any questions for our two panelists. We're then going to be talking about the biggest challenge facing nonprofits today. And then we're going to go into some ideas and strategies on how you can increase donor acquisition, build lasting relationships, and increase donor retention. And then we're going to talk a little bit about technology and making sure you have the right technology in place to make that happen. And then we're going to go into a Q&A session. So just to give a brief introduction, so I'm joined here by Chris Fink. He is our Chief Operating Officer here at Arreva. Welcome, Chris. And I'm joined by David Blyer, who is the co-founder, president, and CEO of Arreva. And my name is Gabriella Salemi. I'm the digital marketing manager here, and I'm going to be your moderator for today.
Thanks, Gabby, for doing this. This is awesome. And I just want to, thank you for putting this together. And we appreciate the audience and hope you'll leave here today with some great ideas on, increasing donor acquisition or engagement. And we look forward to a wonderful time with you guys today. And please make it very interactive. I know it's a one-sided conversation today, but feel free to, send us a chat and we'll try and address all those questions that if any, that you come in.
Okay, so we want to hear from you, like David said. Our first question we're going to ask, you should see a poll come up on your screen. It's, are you pleased with your donor acquisition? So we're going to be talking about donor acquisition, retention, and engagement today. But how do you feel about your donor acquisition? Do you think it could be improved? Do you think you're doing everything that you can do? Is there more that you can do that you would like to do? A few more responses filtering in. These are some pretty interesting results. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And then I'm going to share with you all. You can see we have about 85% of participants are not pleased with their donor acquisition. 15% are. For the 85%, you're in the right place.
Yeah. All right.
There we go. So we want to know, are you pleased with your current donor engagement? We're going to be covering this in our session today too. A lot of these things, they go hand in hand. A lot of the things that you would do to focus on donor acquisition could actually end up affecting your engagement and retention. So we're going to be giving strategies all across the board, but it's great because these all can work in multiple facets and really help you all around. Let a few more responses come in, then I'm going to close this down. And looking here, so about 78% of people on this webinar today are not pleased with their donor engagement. We have 22% who are. And then our next poll. One second, there we go. Are you pleased with your current donor retention? So this is our last sector of the three things that we're going to be covering today. Donor retention is so important, and there's so many new strategies that are out there today and things that you can be doing that you may not know about. And we're going to cover a lot of them today on this webinar. All right. So looking here, you can see we have about 70% who are not pleased with their donor retention and 30% who are. So all of these numbers kind of fit into the same placeholder. And then something we want to know, how many different software solutions are you using? So are you using something different for your fundraising? Are you using something for events, auctions, peer-to-peer, volunteers, anything you might use, memberships? How many different solutions are you using? And are you having to take that data and move it into one centralized location? Do these solutions talk to each other? Do they not? We see a lot of our customers and people that we talk with and nonprofits who they are using multiple solutions and none of them speak to each other. So we want to hear from you guys on how much you're using currently. I'm going to go ahead and close this poll now. There's a lot of people who responded. So you can see about 18% of people are using one solution, 2 to 3 are using 63%, or 63% are using 2 to 3 solutions, 14% are using 4 or more, and 60% of people are not sure. And that's okay. Okay. And yeah. Our last and final question that we want to know from you, and then we're going to get into the meat of our presentation from our 2 presenters. Would you like all applications for donations, online pledges, peer-to-peer fundraising, team fundraising, event registration, grants, volunteer registration, memberships, auctions, text-based donations, all in one solution with one database that's fully integrated and automated? Is that something that sounds appealing to you? Are you not sure if that's something that sounds appealing? Do you maybe want to learn more about that? Are you not interested in that at all? Do you like having things separated into certain silos? So we just want to get your feedback on this as well. We have everybody almost answered, a good amount. So I'll go ahead and share these. So 58% of you say that you think that would be useful to have a fully integrated platform. 8% of you said you do not think it'd be useful, and 35% said they are not sure.
Awesome.
So that's okay, because we're going to show you the benefits of an all-in-one solution today to help you determine if it's something you would find valuable. But I'm going to pass it over now to David and Chris. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Chris, thank you for joining me today. We're pretty excited about talking about, there's a lot to cover in a very short period of time. And I know we're going to try and put this to be about 45 minutes or so, and then leave it open for questions. But there is quite a bit of things that are happening in the industry as a whole. And, everybody today is talking about donor acquisition and donor engagement and donor retention. And we understand that. We hear these things every single day. And we really, a couple things, thanks for doing the polls. It just reinforces a lot of the statistics that are going on. So why don't we just get started? And Chris, unless you have something else you'd like to say on this front, or?
No, that's a great intro, and I'm happy to be here with you, David, too, as well, and happy to see so many people from all across the country here. We've got a lot of participants. It's great. So let's get to it.
All right. So, you can see, really we talk about this, but you can see there's the statistics alone is just sharing with you. And these are, things that are happening in our industry. 43%, as the average donor retention rate. I mean, you've got to look at that. There's a consistent decline year over year. And then, really what's happening overall in the industry, and why are these things happening to, nonprofits across? I mean, there's been so many different factors, but why don't we just start today, and talk about donor acquisition?
Yeah, David, I mean, I was just going to mention, that nonprofits, they've benefited from this unprecedented donation growth over the past 10 years. But the reality is over the past 2 years, donations have been falling and retention's been falling. So I just want to speak a little bit about that. And that the fact is, the donations declined 10% overall, right? And just this year alone, retention's also decreased 20% this year. So what we really want to do is talk about, strategies to really how do we acquire new donors and how do we retain our existing donors, right? So just talk about donor acquisition.
Yeah,
I
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was just going to say, new donors fell as well, 20% so far this year across all nonprofits. So donor acquisition, if it's not a part of your fundraising strategy, it really needs to be, right? I mean, acquisition is about strategizing to identify and solicit potential donors, as well as reactivating those lapsed donors that you may have. I'm sorry, David, but you go ahead.
No, and I agree with you, Chris. I mean, when the industry as a whole, and we did a short poll, with a few hundred people that are attending today. But when the industry as a whole is saying, it's not. So what I'm saying is, it's not surprising that 53% of nonprofits say that donor acquisition is one of their organization's top three fundraising challenges. So we all know there's increased competition for donors' attention. We all know that demographics have changed. We all know that we've been hit by COVID, which is a residual effect because people literally moved. They moved out of their communities. They moved someplace else. They're not necessarily directly aligned 100% with the foundations or charities that they were supporting before. So, what do you do when, and you're not necessarily seeing it that donor acquisition, isn't decreasing. It's how do I gain new donors that have moved into our areas if we're fortunate. And that's just one of the things that we'd like to talk about. And the next thing is, let's just talk about donor engagement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, donor engagement. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, David.
No.
I was going to say it's the process of building and maintaining relationships between your organization and your prospects and your donors, right? And the more you engage your donors, the more likely they are to stick around for the long term and give again. So, in other words, engagement directly impacts your donor retention rate, right? Which is what we're going to talk about next.
Yes, and again, I just reinforce it through the statistics. I love the fact that we did a poll, and the statistics are pretty much similar if you think about it. But 41% cite donor engagement in its own right, and donor retention, again, among the top three fundraising challenges that across the board. And we hear about this every single day. We're talking to so many different nonprofits and charities and foundations on a daily basis, and they're all challenged. So this is not something that's unusual on that front.
Yeah, which is a nice segue into donor retention. How many people on this webinar right now know how many of their donors are giving year to year? Is your donor relationship management solution making it easier for you to get that information and identify who those lapsed donors are? Because that is key. Because it's donor acquisition costs can be high, and the rate of donors who give to your organization year to year on average is declining. So it's in your interest to create a donor retention strategy to increase that lifetime value of your donor base.
And I'm sure you're all challenged with a lot of these things, and I know the polls pretty much even from the polls that we did earlier. But 80% of donors, and this is a really big thing. I mean, Chris, I don't know about you, but I'm a donor as well, and we all have these personal experiences when we give a donation, and it's nice to receive immediate responses. Are you really doing that? And donors are more likely to continue donating if they're just having that, that personal touch, that acknowledgement immediately following the donation. And I know we're challenged with this. I was with a organization and they're like, oh my God, we just did a campaign. And I actually, through technology, I'm actually seeing the donations come in. I'm being notified instantaneously as he's sitting with me and he's saying, as he's looking at his watch and he's saying, oh my God, I got to respond and I don't have the time, right? So, if I gave a donation, I want that immediate response. So when you think about today's meeting, how can you help, do it differently, pivot differently to retain those existing donors and acknowledge them very, very quickly?
All right. Yeah. So some of the reasons why we're struggling. We've talked about some of these reasons why you're struggling already, but economic conditions. I mean, this is an interesting statistic. That total charitable giving has fallen only 3 other times in the last 40 years. That was 1987, 2008, 2009, and now today. So as you could see, all those dates are clearly those times when we were in some economic instability, right, and uncertainty. And that's what we're in right now, and that's why I think that's a big part of nonprofit struggles with acquisition and retention.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at some of the, I don't know, I'd love to be more interactive on this stuff, but when you look at the economic conditions that Chris had just mentioned and what's happening, and if you look at there's such an, I know here in South Florida, there's over 12,000 nonprofits, and there's only just so many people that are giving a donation. So that intense competition and gaining attention and alignment, how are you doing that? Understanding the demographics, understanding the different preferences. I mean, how are you doing that within your donor relationship management database today? And then, again, you hear it all the time. The communications, I'm not necessarily always receiving a personal communication. I give a donation. I'm not understanding, effectively the impact that my donation's having. I haven't been communicated that way. Maybe it was an email and it went to junk, and you just don't know that. But you feel that, you sent out some level of communication. And then we'll talk a lot about consistency, right? Are you expressing gratitude on a consistent basis? Is it efficient? Is the systems that you're using allowing you? I know a lot earlier had mentioned I've got 5 different systems, or I got 4 different systems. The majority of you are using multiple systems. And when that happens, how are you creating that communication instantaneously? How are you communicating? Are you aligning, those communications with the donations and impacting that? So, again, some of the other reasons why we see struggles, just overall, one is we call multi-siloed applications, right? Where you have where you're having many, are you segmenting? Do you have the ability to segment and analyze the data that's within your donor database? Or is it really all over the place and you can't consolidate it? I know one question came in is, it was difficult to consolidate, and I haven't been able to find a solution that could do that. And that is a challenge because not a lot of people know about all the different solutions that are out there. And hopefully we'll touch a little bit on that today. And if not, feel free to reach out to us. But there are a lot of different challenges in that communication. So let's begin. I mean, I know we talked a lot about this, so why don't we just get started and talking about the ideas and strategies that we have today and move, right into talking about identifying and reaching donors through segmentation.
Yeah, David. Well, exactly what you were saying here. I mean, we're giving more detail on what you were just mentioning, which is, how do I identify, reach, and acquire new donors, right? And there's many different ways to do it. But you do have to, data is going to be key to this, especially with, in terms of analysis and segmentation, having multiple channels that you're reaching out to, having multiple ways for people to support and give to your organization, managing all those relationships. You really have to have a powerful constituent management system in place, not only to assist with optimizing your relationships with your existing donors and loyal donors, but also to help you build relationships with new supporters as well and manage those. So when you're trying to convert a prospect into a first-time donor, a donor relationship management system can really help you keep track of that important personal information and record engagement activities, donations, pledges, et cetera, reporting. So, really researching and defining that target market, that data is going to be key to that, right? And prospect research is an interesting thing that can also help you augment your existing data that you're using to analyze and segment your target market. But prospect research is something like, we partner with several companies that do that. That basically, it allows you to use well screening and prospect research data to append to your existing people that you have in your system, and you can identify, people who have not only identify what their capacity to give is, but what their propensity, what their inclination is to give to your organization in particular. So you could have a list of people sitting there in your database, and you don't know how inclined they are to give and how much you should be asking from them, and prospect research and data analysis segmentation can really help you there. And segmenting, having really speaking to a particular audience within your overall prospect and donor base is important too. Having targeted, some people are interested in a certain program in your nonprofit organization, and I want to support that. Some people are just giving because they love what you do in general. You really need to find out, and we'll talk about a little bit later about how to understand who your donors are, what their interests are in your organization, and how to speak to those so that when you do reach out to them, you're speaking in a compelling way that's going to develop a relationship and foster, really creating that bond between you and your potential donors and your donors.
Yeah, I know, Chris, I love the fact that you would talk about both the profiling of and identifying certain, because even when you're profiling, you can build around that profile a specific type of campaign. And I think when you understand it, whether you, like you said, if they're just giving it because they love the organization is one thing. I mean, it could be, so many other reasons. And if you can really understand not only, more importantly, your existing donor database, right? And really understanding why they're giving and what their reasons behind it, you're not just building one target marketing campaign to everybody, which may not necessarily touch on everybody. And this is really why it's important to be able to segment out your database, to understand the donors that you have, be able to put notes into those donor databases, understand the compelling stories that will resonate with the right audience. And I think that's what really this is all about as well, is you've got to resonate with that right audience. So you could have multiple different campaigns, at the same time, but focused on those people that are within your donor database that will really, it goes back to about donor retention, right? And you want to retain that. And the more that they know and the more that they understand and the more that you're resonating with them, as well as if somebody gives a donation on behalf of a friend, what's that alignment there? And the more that you can understand even those individuals, that's about donor acquisition. So now you're acquiring donors through your own network. And then what are the different channels that you're looking at? I mean, there's so many different channels, and we're all challenged with different channels, right? But, does a certain part of your segment that you're really understanding, are they on social media? And if they are, you want to be reaching certain people on social media. But not everybody is on social media. Other people want to be identified on email marketing. Others, they're on the web every single day. So, online advertising is a great way to reach them as well. So, it's not just one way that you're trying to reach the audience, it's multiple ways. And that in its own right, if you can truly understand those existing donors that you have, as well as the new donors that are coming in, and you're having the ability within that database, because it is consolidated, and you can really segment that out and truly understand that, you can then go and align with those marketing campaigns that you're doing. And also you've got, influencers out there. We talk, and I don't mean the influences that we hear about, on social media, but I mean the influences within your organization, your partners, the sponsors that you are working with. There's reasons why they spot. And to me, that's an other channel. We just had a fantastic client, brand new. They went in, they were challenged. He said, David, I'm doing this amazing event and I've got 16 sponsors, and how do I capitalize on those sponsors? Well, there's a reason why they sponsored with him. And when you're looking at that, build a marketing campaign. That's what I'm sharing with you. It's an other channel. So if you can align with your partners because of the cause, they have their, and maybe it's a company and people within their company. So there's a lot of different ways of creating more awareness, of reaching different new potential donors, and increasing that donor database. And at the same time, as you're creating these campaigns and narratives, let's not forget that you're actually sharing that with them, and you're either reinforcing that, right, with the narrative of what you're creating, but using those partners to help you distribute that word and that cause to the different audiences. And maybe even if you have different marketing campaigns, depending upon age, maybe they've segmented out within their databases. So there's a lot of different ways that you could be really identifying and reaching and acquiring new potential donors on that.
Yep. Okay, next slide. Knowing and understanding, this dovetails very, very well with what we were just talking about. Knowing and understanding your donors, there's a few key components to that. Donor segmentation, which we just mentioned on that last slide. Targeted communication. It's essential to foster a deeper connection, right, between you and your org and your donors. So but really, how do you understand who they are, what those segments are? A part of that is better understanding your prospects and donors through various means. One is donor surveys and feedback. Are you measuring your fundraising efforts? Do you know how well they're doing? Are you tracking where your donations are coming from? Are you tracking the effectiveness of those efforts? When a donation comes in online, do you know where it's coming from? When you're sending out email blasts for newsletters, for solicitations, for event invitations, are you measuring the return? How many people are replying? How many donations are coming in because of those efforts? That is key. And if you're not measuring that information and keeping track of it, and I'll talk about that in a minute in terms of data analysis, you aren't going to be able to really know who those targets are and how to communicate to them, right? So gaining that insight into your donors and being able to align them with your organization in the way they want to be aligned is key, right? So you could send surveys after an event. You can send surveys to your volunteers. And we'll talk about volunteers in a minute as well. Donor data analysis. Man, David and Gabby know I work on the onboarding side with clients quite a bit, and by far the biggest problem that I see with new clients is that they have inconsistent data. Their data is not reliable that they're using to analyze their donors and prospects, and that is unacceptable. You really need to make sure that you have a clean, reliable database and a solution that's powerful enough to allow you to analyze that data and really gain those insights so that you can segment, so that you can do that targeted outreach, right, and build those relationships. Otherwise, it's going to be a struggle, and you're going to spend way too much time massaging data and working with it to try and get that information out. Get all that stuff that's sitting in people's heads and get it documented. Create a procedures manual, because the reality is that the people in development departments do not last long, unfortunately, and there's high turnover, and you need to document your procedures and how things are going into your database. So otherwise, you're going to struggle. Donor stewardship and relationship building. Document those relationships as well. All those people that they're sitting in your head, that your board members know, your staff knows. Have a system that allows you to track those relationships, the interconnectedness between all those people, because that is going to help significantly in terms of acquiring new donors, because your board members know people, your staff know people, your volunteers know people, you know people that are potential donors and potential major donors. So where are those relationships? Who knows whom? Document them so they're not in just people's heads. Sit down with those people and find out who they are. And like I said, have a system that allows you to track all of that.
Yeah, and part of that is I love that you talked about the donor surveys and feedback, and again, this is all about engagement, because if you're really engaging with your current donors, your volunteers, even your board members, and you're doing surveys, and we do a lot of surveys. We send out surveys. Not everybody responds to them, but the ones that are responding to them, you can capitalize on that and you can talk about that. The other thing is, even though people didn't respond to the surveys, there's no reason, if you really identify and you're segmenting it, within your database, that you can reach out to them. People will share the information with you. I mean, I sit on boards. I'm very active in the community. I want them. I'm not going to volunteer information, but if they come and ask me, I'm certainly going to help them because I'm very aligned with the organization, but I want them to run it. But if they're asking me, I'm going to provide feedback, because I only want the best for them. So if you're really engaging in them, and then when you feel engaged and you feel part of it, you're just building better stewardship. And I think these little things are so helpful. And even though you don't have 100% of feedback, on the surveys, you're still getting good feedback, and you can correlate that, like Chris said earlier, in tracking that information and categorizing that. That's another way to identify and how and who and what am I targeting for them to really, once I'm really understanding. And maybe you have, generations. Maybe you're targeting and doing a survey to a certain age group, a certain demographic. I mean, there's a lot of different ways of getting this type of feedback. And when you get that, it will allow you to start communicating in a different way. So let's talk about communicating, the story that you have. So how do you get your story out, right? I mean, this is everybody's challenge as well, is always getting that story out. We send hundreds of emails, and we know we're inundated with a lot of different things, but what is compelling, and I'll share when you're thinking about the story and the impact that it really does provide, and there's a few other things besides this, in developing a what I'll call a value proposition, right? What is the value? What is your unique value that's different than others, right? What impact, are you having as an organization within, your community? How are you doing that? How is a donor or a volunteer or a board member is really impacting that? Do they have a story around that? What is that story that they want to share, that will help impact? And even when you send out the story, we even talk about when you're sending and communicating the story, what is going to grab your audience when you send that? What is that subject line that's going to wow you, to make you open that, even though it's coming from your organization? There always has to be something, because again, even though they're giving a donation, even though they're a donor, even though they may be an active donor, but how do I get the inactive donors to continue being involved, right? So what is that real story, and how are you building that story out? I think those are really important things. Not everybody knows what your mission is, believe it or not. I mean, we were with a faith-based organization, and I happened to be sitting in a room, and they literally in the room told us about their mission. And I thought I knew about their mission, and I didn't. It was such a compelling mission. I said, why isn't this on your website? Why aren't you sending this out to your donors? Why aren't you sending this out to your volunteers to share this? What you're doing is amazing. I mean, I got goosebumps personally when I heard this. So, telling that story and getting your mission out and how it's impacting the people and how it's giving donations. I mean, we'll talk more about that, but share those personal stories, highlight those challenges that you're faced, tell them the challenges that you're having every single day, the journey that you're on to solve those challenges, and then obviously share the positive outcomes of what the goals that you set up, and how you share that. And those challenges, even though they're positive outcomes on this, they're never ending. I mean, and you want to continuously doing that, and you have to be consistent in your messaging. And whether it's through, and again, when we go back to the channels and channel distribution, how are you sending that out? Are you doing this through a video? I mean, we have a video on the screen, and I love videos, but is the video too long? Is the image the right image? We talk about images when people walk by. I mean, literally everybody talks about images, and we talk about infographics and the impact that it's having, and how you're doing good. So when you think about the story, build that story out that's compelling, and that story may have to be pivoted to the different audiences that you're doing. I don't know, Chris, if you have anything you'd like to share on that from your experiences.
Yeah, well, I was just going to mention, tying my donation to the impact it's going to have is incredibly important, right? And we see that being done successfully, not so successfully, right, David? I mean, you can tie the impact that a donor can have on your organization through a solicitation that you're sending out in an email, and if I give this donation, this is what it can support. This is the impact it can have. Even on the donation form itself, David, we have some clients who have set up their donation forms to tie that impact to the amount that they're giving. They actually have visually images set up saying, look, if you give this amount, this is allow us to buy these supplies for this classroom, or it's going to allow us to fund a person to come and stay at our Ronald McDonald House for the next 3 days. As a donor, that's what people really want. They want to know, if I give you this money, they don't want to just go into a hole and say, okay, so you say thanks, but also you can tie that impact to their donation as well through follow-up communications, right? Contextualizing those follow-ups after someone gives. I can't tell you how many times, David, you said you're a donor, I am too, how many times I volunteered my time or given money and I haven't even been thanked, and much less, had a specific thank you that really thanks me for what I was donating, whether it was time or money. So using targeted thank you letters, not a generic one, for specifically what they're giving to. If they're giving to a specific program, have follow-up communications around that program and the impact that their donations having. Personally thank donors who are giving larger donations to try and foster that relationship to get them to give more later, right? So anyway, it's all tied together.
Hey, just one note. I just got a chat. I just want to make sure
Mhm.
everybody's seeing the screen. Somebody said they're seeing a black screen. I just want to make sure is
Huh.
everybody seeing the screen?
I am seeing it fine. Yep,
Yeah.
looks like so.
Okay.
Yeah, most
Yes.
we're getting a
Okay.
bunch of
Thank
chat
you.
saying yes. So
Yeah. I
sounds
appreciate
like
the
it.
responses so quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I just want to make sure others weren't having the problem. I'm sorry if somebody's having this. You may want
Yeah,
to dial in and dial out, but I just want to, make
exactly.
sure. So thank you for that.
Disconnect and reconnect. Yep.
Um, and then I have a couple of questions, but Chris, I'll save some of the questions for the end. But when we're talking about the communications, I think also communications is as we're talking about this is impact reports. I don't know if everybody uses an impact report, and I've seen impact reports with regular updates and I think highlighting outcomes and achievements and what is actually happening, the meals that you're serving, the staff that you've trained, the donations that are coming in, where that was given, how many children or from that are they servicing and assisting in the community. I just think whatever you're providing, and then where are you putting it? I mean, I've seen some wonderful recent websites literally right on the homepage that automatically had the impact. So if somebody went to their homepage, they would see maybe it wasn't every item of where their money was going and what they were servicing, but maybe it was the highlights. Maybe it was the top four things that they wanted to make sure that their donors, their volunteers, or people that were just learning about them, and coming to their site. So it was right on their front page. You want things to be very donor centric, as I call them.
Mhm.
And I think having an impact report of that sort is just so critical, and then being consistent on delivering this. I mean, even though you may have it on your website, you build a certain template. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, a lot of people feel that they have to reinvent the wheel. You don't. But if you can come up and, we have a nice report on this, and, there's a few organizations that I've just seen have done an outstanding job, on providing this. So, it's that
Yeah.
it's that type of engagement, and that can be to everybody, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be segmented to one individual because everybody's a little bit different. But if they're aligned with your organization, I can't emphasize, on the impact report that I've seen, so many have done in a great way. But I
Mhm.
do think it's really important in doing that. Chris, any thoughts on the impact reports that you're seeing?
Yeah, no, I agree. I've seen a few that are just amazing, and it really, like you said, David, don't reinvent the wheel. I think most of you have an annual report that you're creating already that has this information in it, but most donors and prospects are not going to want to read your annual report, right? So you could take that annual report, take the key data points in it, turn it into a digestible, pretty infographic type of impact report that you could put on your site, and it's going to be much more engaging. Yeah, absolutely.
And then I just think continuity is so important. Continuous engagement. I mean, you know, and if you can really identify, and you're segmenting out your donors, I mean, just because somebody's giving $10 doesn't mean that they're not going to give a lot more over time. But you've got to engage them, right? I mean, it's all about engaging, these different types of donors that are coming in, and then it's all about personalizing updates. Keeping the donors informed on activities, on projects, on accomplishments. I mean, how are you communicating with them? Again, it goes back to that segmentation. And Chris, while we're talking about segmentation, a question did come in, and it was like, what are some of the groups you see in segmentation? Is there a trend of groups when you're segmenting this out?
There are, absolutely, and it depends on the effort that you're talking about. I mean, I actually, there are segments that you could be using for donor acquisition, and those segments could be, their capacity to give and capacity for major gifts, their relationships with other donors or other people on your staff board, affinity with your cause, philanthropic indicators, like are there boards of other organizations, they have volunteer history, etc. But then there's also, existing donor segments that you could, assuming you have this data, right? and existing donors is obviously donation history, right? What have they given to in the past? That can give you a lot of information. Assuming you're tracking that information, that can tell you a lot about their affinity and what they're aligned with in your organization. If they, maybe they only go to your event once a year, or maybe they're giving to this one program consistently. Maybe they're giving you $10 a month in your monthly. We'll talk about that in your monthly recurring giving program, and they're a big supporter, right? They're very aligned with your organization. You can tell just because they're giving to you monthly. So there are different data points that when was the last time they gave? What was their largest gift? What was, right? All that information should be easily untapped for you to go out and reactivate those lapsed donors, or ask those people who are giving you X number of dollars to maybe increase it, or identify those potential major donors for your capital campaign because their largest gift was over $500. So as well as using that prospect research data we talked about earlier. So there's lots of different, I could go on and on, but I'll stop.
Hey, so why don't we talk a little bit about implementing what I will call a multi-channel marketing strategy and make it easy to give in multiple different ways, right? I actually love talking about this subject anyways, but first of all, it's really interesting when you think about the statistics that are out there today. And when 61% of donors worldwide prefer to giving online, you need to make sure that you make your website, you make your donation page, you make your event pages, all donor-centric. And that's what we call, that's what we're calling donor-centric, where it's very easy to use. In fact, I was just with a group that did this whole analysis in the church industry, and they were really sharing with us, when you go to churches, there was never a real emphasis because people just have a proficiency to give. But when you started to go to their websites, it wasn't easy to give as much as they thought it was easy to give. So you need to make, your website very, very easy on a donor-centric way. You need to communicate immediately. I think there was a great website we could share out there, which I liked on the impact and somebody went. It was a Boys and Girls Club of Salt Lake City. I don't know, Gabby, if you want to post the link that they could go see it, but I thought it was an awesome way of giving and different ways of giving very simply, because I look at all of these things, and when you are looking at the different ways, you want to make it easy for anybody, whether volunteers, donors, new constituents, somebody that was aligned because they gave a tribute gift. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but building an online presence. And I think that's really what this is all about. And then, when we talk about multiple ways of giving, I know there's a lot out there today, and I know we have a little screenshot, but I love talking about this stuff. But when you look at a menu bar today and you see it says ways to give and you click on it, most people aren't. And if you track your website, and there's different ways of tracking your website and seeing where people are going, but if you're really tracking that website, you'll see that they're not always opening it. So what are different ways and how do you get that message out there? So if you're providing, and one good example is the ability to have what I would call unlimited donation pages. And if you haven't heard about this, let me know. I'll send you a couple of different pages that you could see what we mean by unlimited donation pages. But it really resonates across all industries within the nonprofit sector. So you're giving them one page where they can say, oh, if I give a $10 donation, or if I give a $50 donation, or if I give a $2,500 donation, it's all on the same page. It could be, where you have different societies or different funds or just a general donation, but it should be all on one page and making it easy for the donors to navigate through this. I mean, there's just so many other ways of giving, right? I mean, we talk about peer-to-peer fundraising. And when we talk about peer-to-peer fundraising, people think about crowd fundraising, but I'm not talking about crowd fundraising because you're only getting the money that one individual is helping you raise. You want to make sure that when you're giving, and it ties back automatically, immediately into your donor relationship management. So you want all of these things to tie back to your donor relationship management through your website. And you also want to have, a clear call to action. And that's really what we always talk about. It has to be visually appealing. I just had, we were just talking to somebody, he says, oh my God, I can't believe where the donation is. I can't believe where social media is. When I go into it, I'm not looking at these things. I mean, you always want to make sure that you have a very clear call to action in the multiple ways that you're asking people to give. And when you're doing that, it is another way of making it simple. It is another way of increasing potentially the donor acquisition, right? And acquiring these new donors. And then how are you communicating with them? Chris, do you have anything else you'd like to talk about on that?
No, I mean, I totally agree with everything you're saying. Someone just asked, I said, please, I think they said, please end unlimited donation page. I think they said, please, I think they mean, please explain unlimited donation pages. I think the idea behind that is that you can have more than one donation donate now page, right? And those donation pages, which our solution allows you to have as many donation pages as you want. So that way you can have landing pages that speak to those segments we were talking about, right? So when you're sending people to a certain donation page, it's not some generic page. You can have, of course, a donate now page that's appeals to everybody. But for targeted segmented communications, you want to speak to those groups, and that's where you can have multiple donation pages that really speak to and support whatever that person's interest is or aligned with. So I think I don't know if I answered that question. I hope I did, but anyway. But
You did. You did.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I got excited when you said that, Chris, because the other thing that I think that resonates when people are coming to you and giving, and however they're giving, this is a really other important thing that I think a lot of organizations don't realize. But when you have a donation page, or you're using peer-to-peer, or you're using events, or anything that you're inviting people to do within your organization, a really important thing, and I can't emphasize this enough, is you want to make sure that they're not being pushed off your website. And I have seen this way too many times where a donor comes in, they click on donation, they're pushed off to a certain vendor, and it's the URL of the vendor. You don't want that to happen. I'd love to caution everybody here, and I know we have a very big audience out here that is listening. They should stay on your website. And the reason why is because of site engagement. You want to make it easy for them to always stay on your website and leave your website when they decide to leave your website, not because you asked them to register for an event and they're being pushed off, or asking them for a donation or a reoccurring donation. So just if you're not doing that today, let us know. And if we can help you in any way, there's a lot of different ways of doing that. But in talking where I said reoccurring donation, let's go talk about a little bit more about different ways of giving and reoccurring programs that you should be looking at.
Yeah, and key to this is making sure that you have a system in place that's going to allow you to manage those recurring donations easily. This is one of those things where you should just be able to put a form on your website, allow people to sign up for recurring donations, and it's a set it and forget it, and you don't really have to do much else after that, right? Because otherwise you don't want to be managing recurring donations monthly and manually processing all those donations, because hopefully you're going to have a lot of donors who are giving monthly after you've promoted that recurring program and you've really encouraged people to sign up for it. Without a solution in place that can manage that easily, you're going to struggle, and you're going to get buried under just trying to process all those monthly gifts. Number two, getting people to actually become a part of that recurring donation program, you have to facilitate the ease of that, right? Through, our donation forms allow you to actually take those one-time donors on your donation page and become sustaining donors, recurring donors, by just checking a box and saying, hey, become a recurring donor, and it's on one form, so you don't have to have push them to a separate form to become a recurring donor, right? That's important. But you also have to promote your monthly giving program, or else no one's going to know about it. I mean, that's the reality, right? You can do that through social media, through email marketing, have it always sitting, on the bottom of your newsletter somewhere or mentioned. You got to constantly promote this and make sure people are aware of it, have it on your website, because otherwise they're not going to be aware. And here's some statistics I want to reinforce too, because this is a problem we see, and I just want to make sure that you are taking this into account if you really do want to put the effort into having a recurring donation program. Is that on average 10% of recurring donors disappear after 1 month. There's 14% you lose after 3 months, and then another 23% you lose after 6 months. So that is because they're initially they're aligned with the organization. They feel like they want to support you, but then they don't feel like they're getting much in return after that. So you have to make sure that you have a communication strategy in place for those recurring donors, right? You have to check with them, create milestones for them, share images, stories, statistics to them, keep them excited about the impact that they're having alongside of your organization. Otherwise, you're going to lose them.
Yeah, Chris, I'd love to build on, if you don't have a monthly giving program and it really is about a reoccurring, you should really think about giving that. But, one thing is to have a program, and I just really want to emphasize this, but recognizing and thanking those donors specifically that are doing that reoccurring. I mean, it's a little different than just the acknowledgement on a donation. I mean, if you can get somebody to provide that every month reoccurring giving, you want to make sure that they are really understanding that commitment that they're giving, that acknowledgement, and making them always feel special. I mean, there's so many different ways of making those donors feel special through different types of engagement. Whether you're offering a perk, maybe every 90 days you would think of something. Maybe you're having an event that is coming up, and those people that have done a reoccurring, that you make them feel a little bit differently, and make them feel like a VIP. And maybe they get early access, or maybe you do something before the whole event for these people that are giving on reoccurring, but then make sure that you're promoting that. I mean, you want to make other donors of, hey, if you join this reoccurring program, hey, we have these other features or these other benefits that we're offering, because people love that. I mean, they truly do. And it may not be, maybe it is only $10 a month, and I would take $10 every month, and it adds up. I mean, if they really see the impact, and you go back to the compelling stories, and you go back to the impact reports, and you are consistent on this, you will see an increase in your reoccurring giving. It could even be from a peer-to-peer fundraising event that you have, or an event that you have, and bringing them back to that type of program. So I think just emphasizing that when we talk about, I go back to, engaging in the peer-to-peer fundraising and campaigns that also are encouraging this. So maybe, and I've seen so many different ways, and I know there's never enough time to talk about this, but so many different ways of using the same product being peer-to-peer fundraising. I mean, I've seen organizations use it where it's a time frame. There's a sense of urgency. It's 30 days. Here's the compelling story. And if you could give a donation as opposed to one-time donation, and here's the impact that reoccurring is going to actually help. And if you would just commit for a year, right? I mean, and tell those stories and empower your board members, your donors, to easily, on their behalf, and writing these personal messages out, because peer-to-peer fundraising is another way of increasing your donor acquisition. It's also a great way of engaging your existing donors. It's also another way, when they feel engaged, that their retention rate is always up. So these are just some of the ideas and programs and thoughts that we have for time on multiple ways of reoccurring. So let's talk a little bit about tributes and memorial gifts. I think this is really great, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. It is another tracking and making sure that you are managing your tribute and memorial donations. I know some organizations out there don't get as many as others, but I believe they're typically always a piece of the donations that you get. And managing those and tracking those can really feed into acquiring new donors, as well as engaging with your existing donors. In that, when you're getting a gift, and if hopefully you do have a donation form that allows people, enables them to give gifts in memory or in honor of, what you want to do is track who the people that want to be notified on behalf of those memorial or honor gift. Because those people can also become donors themselves, but they also want to know from your organization who's giving on their behalf of the people that they know are related to. And in a solution like ours, it's very easy to manage that. It's very robust. It has automated communications around not only the people that are giving the tribute gifts, the memorial gifts or honor gifts, but it's also allowing you to very easily manage some communications out to the people that want to be notified on behalf of those memorial and honor gifts. And there are other ways of recognizing those people too, right? Through tribute walls, personalized communications, certificates, living memorials. You can social media tributes, allowing people to push those out onto social media that they're giving in honor and memory of somebody. And we do have some clients that do because of those efforts are tremendously successful in bringing in tribute gifts in general. David, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the, first of all, here's an interesting statistics, Chris.
Yeah.
33% of donors worldwide are giving tribute gifts. And if 33% are giving tribute gifts, I'll tell you one of the issues that I've heard constantly, even from board members and from donors that are giving a tribute gift. You've got to think about this, right? If I'm giving a tribute gift, especially if it's in honor of, and of course it could be in memory of, but if I'm giving a tribute gift, there's an alignment between myself, the organization, and the person that I'm giving a tribute gift to. There has to be that alignment. You have to really think about these things. You should have on your system today, and the challenge that I've heard is when they do give a donation, because everybody, and I've been seeing some, chats on this, but when that tribute gift comes in, one, I hope you're automatically getting all the information about the individual that's giving the donation. Equally as important, I hope you're getting the information about the individual that they're giving a tribute to. The issue is that that acknowledgement is not being readily sent out instantaneously. And in many cases, I'm hearing it took a month. It took 2 months. I literally hear this. It took 3 months. I was talking to a board member that gave a tribute gift and said, David, could you imagine? 3 months. I was embarrassed to ask the person if they ever got acknowledged. I still don't know. I would call the organization. They said, oh, we're sending it out. We're sending it out. We're sending it out. When you talk about retention, this is a big reason on retention. And if you think about a tribute gift, there's meaning behind this. So if your system isn't doing this today, you should demand it, that when somebody is giving a tribute gift as a donor, a volunteer, a board member, whatever, and there's that alignment, that they have the ability to put into that system the person's email, a comment, and when they click submit with that donation, that person automatically gets that acknowledgement instantaneously. And at the same time, your organization is capturing all of that information, getting that notification, and setting up a best practice that will allow them, whether if they couldn't do it immediately, at least maybe by the end of that week, that they have the ability to print out a report and say, I want to look at all tribute gifts this week and assign that. Those are little things that are important, and that's the solution for retention. And it really is an important little thing. And we talk about that. But also, like Chris mentioned, you want to acknowledge the people that are giving tribute gifts and build different tribute walls. And if you haven't done that, it could be plaques, it could be on your emails, it could be, it could be on your website, it could be, in your organization. But there's a lot of different programs, and I know we're limited with time today, so I'm just going to move forward on multiple ways and peer-to-peer fundraising. So we'll talk a little bit about peer-to-peer fundraising.
Yeah.
And if you just,
David,
go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, you and I have mentioned this quite a few times, and I've actually was on a call this week where someone actually wasn't sure what it was. So I just want to make sure we all know what peer-to-peer fundraising is. Peer-to-peer fundraising allows individuals to set up their own personal fundraising pages to raise money on behalf of your organization, or your program or something like that. So it's self-service, meaning, and our solution provides a platform to do this, where you can put a page up online, you direct people to it, they can go set up their own individual fundraising pages, and then they can solicit their own friends, family, etc., to give money to your organization. I just want to make sure I put that out there, because I realize some people may not even know what it is. But anyway, sorry, go ahead, David.
No, and Chris, sometimes we all take that for granted. So I love when you actually share that, because we hear, oh, I'm using crowd fundraising, but it's not. It's a form. But peer-to-peer fundraising is another way that should be fully integrated into your platform as one solution. I'll share that. And when you think about, on the average, that more than 20% of donors refer other donors, it's another way of not only increasing your donor engagement, but that 20% you could increase too, because if you're really engaging those donors, that number could potentially go up. So when you think about the peer-to-peer fundraising, it should be fully integrated, and then coming up with different campaigns. We talked about that earlier, right? You could have a campaign, you could have a moment in time that, it could be a 30-day window. I love when I love when people build peer-to-peer fundraising pages and the organization is setting up the narrative. I mean, and that's the other part about it. Help the people that are creating the page on your site. Maybe they need that narrative, and you should have it. What is the message that you want that individual to send? So you could possibly, and say, feel free to edit it. I love doing that, where you're crafting those different things. Have different fundraising events. I mean, you could encourage supporters to host their own fundraising events. I mean, I saw it was a person said, I'm aligned because my family member is associated with this. And he was 13 years old. It was a bar mitzvah, if you can imagine, a 13-year-old. And his way of giving was building his own peer-to-peer fundraising, and asked for $180. I'll never forget this. He raised I think $1,800. I mean, and he more than exceeded. So if you are engaging and giving people ideas and different ideas of different ways of using peer-to-peer fundraising for different types of events, that's what we mean by that. But it is a great way to put it. You could use it for your own, donor database. It doesn't just necessarily have to be about giving it to individuals and that relationship and they're sending it out. By the way, if you are using peer-to-peer, I always want to make sure, and I love this, is that your peer-to-peer fundraising takes it a step further. And what I mean by that is when a donor or whoever is hosting their own individual page and they're sending this out, that one, you're giving it set up where it's very easy right on your site, that they can load all of their individual emails and friends that they want to send it to. They have a link that they can click on it when the donor gets it. But when they do give a donation, that person, whoever created that donation page, should also receive an acknowledgement of the individual that gave a donation, so they can thank them. You should automatically get a notification immediately that you could acknowledge them. And if you are acknowledging them, it's another way, because there's some alignment there, right? I mean, I know if I built a peer-to-peer fundraising, I'm not sending it to all my friends. I'm going to send it to my group of friends that I know that would more than likely give a donation or have an interest in the organization. So it's another way of really increasing your overall donor acquisition. That's one way. Another way is if the donor that is really, or whoever is hosting the site, they're engaged because you've done something, right? So there's that donor, retention side of it. So it really does a lot of things. I've seen organizations put together where they use their own existing donor database, but using peer-to-peer and providing the information and why they are looking for their existing donors. And then I've seen other organizations that put so much emphasis and time on building out their peer-to-peer fundraising that a majority of their fundraising is actually coming from peer-to-peer fundraising. Chris, I know volunteers is a near to dear in what you do.
Well, I know we're talking about donor and strategies, but volunteers are donors, right? Are they donating their time, but also sometimes they give money as well. I know I have. So it's important to have a robust volunteer management system in place to make sure you're not only using your volunteers as efficiently as possible, but also to recognize their efforts, right? I hear way too often, and I've mentioned this earlier myself, it's happened that volunteers they stop donating time and money because of a lack of recognition. So are you tracking your volunteers and their activities, their hours they've worked, are you recognizing them? Are you giving out awards, etc.? So you have to have a system in place to manage assuming you have volunteers. Not all organizations out there are volunteer based, but most use them to at least a limited extent. So you do want to make sure, because they are donors, right? And in their mind, they are as well, I think, in terms of even if it is just their time. So are you using them efficiently? Are you tracking their skills and interests so that you know how to align them with the right jobs? Are you recognizing them with events or through award ceremonies? Do you have volunteers who are helping you lead the other volunteers and recognizing them as well? Are you featuring volunteers in certain stories, outreach testimonials to recognize them? There's also potentially, especially with COVID, right, virtual volunteer opportunities. So managing your volunteers, you have to look at them as donors as well. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked, and sometimes you see a lot of churn on the volunteer side because of that. Anyway, David, did you want to say anything?
No, you know what? For time,
Yeah,
there's
I
so
know.
much more
We got to get
information.
through
I
these
know we're
slides, so
really
let's keep going.
tight on time, but I just
Yep.
we'll continue doing this. But I think just to build on the volunteer side in running different events, and I know a lot of organizations run events, Chris, and it could be a gala, and it could be. But I also believe, going back to what Chris mentioned about events and appreciation events. I mean, it doesn't have to be a 100 people, a 200 people, 1,000 people. I mean, you could have your own appreciation gala, right in your office, and think about doing things like that. I just think exclusive gatherings, where it's intimate, like I said, bringing them into the office, or maybe having a special reception that's exclusive for these type of volunteers, or exclusive for certain types of donors, and running this, having impact tours. I went on a few impact tours, and it changed the way I viewed the organization. I mean, literally. I mean, I know it's so difficult to articulate who you are and what you do, and you're so proud of what you do, and I thank you all for what you do each and every day, because it's not easy. But if you have a place and a physical facility, and you can invite people, it changes their mind. I mean, it really just does. And then and then just different ways of appreciation, do educational workshops. I mean, I love, that is special to the group. It doesn't necessarily have to always be about the organization. It could be tied to the organization. Having a special speaker come in. I mean, these are just different ideas, that you can really resonate with your existing donors. So it's not just about increasing your donor acquisition. It's about that. And I go back to that donor retention, which is so important. And it always applies back to donor engagement, right? So those are just some of the other things. And then just personalizing this stuff, Chris. I love when you talk about timeliness and things of that. But
yeah, I mean, I already touched on this quite a bit, right? And you did too, just in your last comment about being timely about your acknowledgments. I have seen too many. I've walked into organizations where, yeah, they lost a donor who gave them $30,000 a year every Christmas, because they just didn't even recognize them, didn't even get back to them and acknowledge the donation. So, I mean, that is just the basics, but also being timely about it, being targeted, being contextualizing that communication, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of what they're giving for. Is it just a generic donation, which a generic thank you? Is this to support a certain program? Is it over a certain amount where you should be personally thanking them? Just making sure that timeliness, personalization, but then also having follow-ups too after that. That's the biggest way to not retain a donor is let them give once, send them a thank you, and that's it, and they never hear from you again, right? So express gratitude on an ongoing basis, right, through different ways. And then measure and track that information so that you can prove upon it, right? So how well are we doing? How well does our follow-up communication, do A/B testing with emails, et cetera, so that you know what your most effective communications are. So anyway, David.
And I think having an automated system that you can set up, where you have custom thank you acknowledgement and receipts and notifications, is really just one thing that, okay, they got an automatic acknowledgement and a thank you. But if you're getting these notifications instantaneously, or you don't have the time to immediately call them, but you can go in and segment out your database and say, I want to see everybody that gave a donation this week, and distribute that to your staff. That's why I say expressing gratitude. It's not just that automatic thank you acknowledgement receipt. That one little phone call that could be less than 3 minutes, just saying, hey, I just received your donation. I hope you got our acknowledgement. I just wanted to thank you. It resonates for so long. And then, just like Chris said, I think constant feedback of what you're doing is just essential.
Yeah. And if what we're talking about sounds difficult to you to do, then you're not using the right solution. It should be easy. You should be able to have multiple templates to send emails to, or printed letters, and create those very easily. And it should not be an onerous process.
And then just in general, the donor recognition, we've been talking about that. I think personalizing and spotlighting individuals, whether they're on your website, whether it's through social media, through different channels, just promoting them of what they've done and how they've helped with their donations, and maybe they don't want to disclose how much they gave, and that's not important. But, you see in the back of brochures, the different levels. But go beyond that, right? Having those exclusive opportunities, at offering certain benefits, making them feel like they're a VIP. I mean, it just resonates. Believe it or not, I mean, even as a donor, and I sit here as a donor and a volunteer, and you know what? It's nice. And when you feel that you're engaged and there is a situation, I mean, you know, I've heard so many situations that, oh my God, we're having this event. We had 22 tables. We've only sold 12. And when the audience is engaged, and whether it's donors or board members or volunteers, and they really feel because you've done an outstanding job of communicating, they will immediately buy a table in many cases. I mean, this is really what's happening. So, you know, I know some of these things about recognizing donors and getting their feedback on a regular basis isn't always easy, but it's easier than you thought. And then I just like to talk really quickly about all of these wonderful things that we shared with you today. And I know it was a lot. Is a couple of case studies. You know, this was an organization, when you think about it, this was an organization that was literally an all-volunteer organization. And the only money that they ever spent was on a website and on their fully integrated online fundraising, donor relationship management, and auction software. They started out with no data. They had a lot of volunteers, and through their volunteers, they started increasing their donor database. They were curing, or they have multiple cures that they're trying to cure through research. And one of the segments, which was a deficiency in type 1 of glycogen, they said, if we raise $7 or $8 million, we will be able to come up with a cure. Not only did they raise their money, and this always shares goosebumps with me, not only did they raise the $8 million that they need and they continue growing this, they actually solved one of the deficiencies over the last year. Their website has constantly changed. It's become more informational, even though it's still a very much, you know, a donation platform in the sense of raising money. But now they're creating more awareness and more information about the deficiencies, what they've already solved, where they're solving it. But they did it through different creative campaigns. And, you know, they re-engaged their volunteers. They talked about how it was doing with pandemic. They just continuously doing it. But the results, they exceeded their goals by over 66%. You know, they used different compelling stories. I mean, they just did so many things that we talked about today. And it's always nice to hear the challenges that a lot of these organizations face, but they're actually solving the problem. Another one that I just want to share with you was another organization, and, you know, they're across the country, but they're all individual chapters. And this was the most interesting one because I actually got to physically go visit the organization. At the time, it was run by the city. The police department took over it for whatever reason, whatever those political reasons were. And when they originally got the building, I got to share with you, it was in shambles. I wouldn't bring a kid into one of these programs, but it was an after school for, you know, kids that, you know, needed a place to go. Within less than 6 months when they took it over, they already owed money. They had less than 20 kids in their after school program, and they had less than 50 constituents in their database that were not even active. And they took this over, and it was amazing. I mean, one, they got the local community to get involved in helping, you know, fix the whole building, painting the building, bringing in grass, working with Home Depot, working with Lowe's, working with all of these different community providers and their sponsors. And then they went after the marketplace. They started educating the schools and the teachers and the parents. It was really an amazing story. They started running their first events, and it was a lot. I got to tell you, for a very small staff, they were doing a run and walk and a spaghetti dinner, and now they do this on an annualized basis. They were talking, and when you think about it, this is a very niche because it's in a very specific part of Broward County. So they're not reaching out to so many different people. Today, they have over 5,000 active donors. They have over 500 kids in their programs. I mean, it's just a huge turnover story, but they used the technology. And I will tell you a little funny one on this. I actually volunteered, you know, to help them out. And I also registered for the event. And as a client, which is a client, I registered for the event, and not 2 minutes later, the executive director called me, and I'm like, oh my God, I think everything's going right with him. I'm just thinking this in my head. I pick up the phone. I said, hey, Tim, how are you? He says, hey, I just wanted to thank you for registering for the event. I said, I said, how did you know? I said, I used your software. But if you think about this, this resonated with me as a donor, as a person that registered. And, this is why technology should make it easier for you. I just want to share a little bit about leveraging technology. You heard about the challenges, that are being faced today. There's a lot of good software out there. And I know a lot of you in your polls today said you're using multiple different platforms. But, when you're using multiple different platforms, you got to move data around, you're limited with the communications. And again, we go back to, is this affecting your donor acquisition? When you're not necessarily communicating immediately with the donors, are you having an inconsistent relationship, and is your donors having, an inconsistent experience, and giving a donation or volunteering? Are they getting, the information that you want on a relatively basis? But these are a lot of challenges that we hear every single day. I don't know, Chris, if you want to talk about anything else on these challenges before I go to the next slide, just for quick purpose.
No, keep going. Time is limited.
The way to do this, and I'll just share this with you, is we do, I hear a lot, wow, this was really informational. I'd love to solve the problem of having multiple systems, but what's out there? I do want to share with you, it's a little plug for Arreva, but Arreva is truly the only all-in-one online fundraising, donor relationship management, healthcare hospitality, and auction software, where it is one unified database. And it really is eliminating and helping you, not with everything that we talked about today, but it is helping you increase your donor engagement. It is helping you increase your donor retention. It is helping you increase your donor acquisition, because it is a one consolidated system, making it easy for organizations to really accomplish the goals that they're wanting. We've been around for 30 years. We have over 6,000 clients. Our clients have done, through different software applications that we provide, 30,000 live and virtual events. We've been vetted by some of the, notable national organizations. I'm not going to go through this, but you see a lot of applications here. But the nice thing about this is it is a fully integrated solution. You don't have to buy all these applications, but they are one solution, which we call ExceedFurther. All of the applications are mobile responsive. We have a full-blown data migration. I know there was a question earlier about, where's the question about I just want to share the question if I can find this quickly. Gabby, I don't know if you can find it. Let me just, my experience has no one it can easily transition for so many different options. Blackbot has tried and failed, and I agree. We've actually replaced, and I'm not saying this, but because of our data migration process, we don't move data just for the sake of moving data. We can, and it's not always a one-to-one ratio where you're replacing, a donor relationship management for a donor relationship. And we look at all sources, whether you're pulling it from an event platform, a donation platform, a donor relationship, and we do, part of that is cleansing the data. And I have a lot more. We also do provide donor-centric websites. We have an amazing process, and the outcomes that our clients are seeing are really amazing. They're literally seeing a return on investment. We're eliminating, on average, 4 applications that are individual silos, and eliminating that movement and automating that process. Organizations that have a board that is financially responsible for raising certain money, they're seeing 100% of their board giving. The way the product was developed, you're never leaving the website, and that's really important. So site engagement is automatically going up. And on average, our clients are seeing, through different methods of using different platforms and different software that we offer, an increase in their donor relationship management database. And I just like to say, with our clients for good. And from that, we hope you enjoyed our meeting, Chris, and I'll let Chris, end it. Chris, would you like to say parting words?
I just want to say thanks to everybody for your great questions and for being involved today. We really appreciate it. And I just really appreciate the time they gave to us. And it sounds like some people are interested in talking to us further. So I'm looking forward to talking to all of you.
Awesome. And one question, Chris, I have is, I love the concept of an impact report. And I want nothing more than to do one, but I always end up with the age old, just never seem to find the time to put one together. Aside from simply making this a priority,
Yeah.
I was curious if you had any tips or suggestions on putting a report together so it doesn't feel or become an overwhelming project.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. And that's why I mentioned, and maybe they asked that before I mentioned this, is to leverage that annual report if you have one, right? Because you have all that information, the stats in it. It's just not as easily digestible in a report form versus an infographic, let's say. And that example that we showed you was, I think they had help from a marketing person who had some graphic design help as well there, right? To really highlight a few key stats that were conveying the impact your organization is having, right? So I do understand that trying to get all that stuff from scratch, and if you don't have that information at your fingertips, could be onerous and daunting, right? So I think the first question, if you don't have that data at your fingertips, to ask is, how can I start measuring the impact that we're having, if you're not already, because that's important to do. And then if you do have it, yeah, I mean, maybe there's a person that you can lean on that has a little bit more marketing experience, because it's really about taking that information and making it presentable and pretty and easy to easy. And sometimes it takes someone with a little bit more of like Gabby's expertise here on the marketing side to present.
Gabby, I want to thank you for putting this together. You're wonderful. I'd like to thank my co-partner here, Chris Fink. You have incredible, valuable experience, and I want to thank you for sharing this. And I just want to thank the audience, and quite a few of you have stayed on for the entire time, and I know we went over quite a bit. I hope this was very informative. And I want to thank each and every one of you every day, because we love what we do here at Arreva. We love supporting our clients, and we know how hard each of you work every single day to get your messaging out and get your donors and communicate. And we really thank you all for participating today. So I want to thank you for that. Gabby, you want to end it?
Yeah, everyone, if you would like us to reach out to you for a demo request, or just to learn more about anything you saw, any questions you might have, go ahead and drop it into the chat box. We'll make sure we get in contact with you and schedule something. Thank you all for being here today. We'll be sending out a recording of the webinar and a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. So if you didn't take notes, no need to worry there. You'll receive all this information.
And the ones that have texted us there, thank you. Your email address is here to either schedule some time. We will absolutely follow up with all of you. And I really appreciate you guys asking for a follow-up, and we can go into this a little bit further and share a lot of more experiences with you. But again, thank you so much, and have a great day. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.